Greetings, I'm Dr. Talisa Sullivan, and I'm here with Dr. Angela Clark-Luke. We're going to talk to you all today about shifting from the narrow zone of zero tolerance to a wide region of restorative practices, and we're going to discuss in detail Black girls in school discipline. Again, I'm Talisa, and I am an administrator for Equity and Access. I am a warrior for Equity and Access, too. I'm an adjunct professor for California State University, San Bernardino in the College of Education, and I am the CEO of Transformational Leadership Consulting Services, TLC. And again, Dr. Luke is with me. Dr. Luke, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Angela Clark-Luke, and I'm a professor at California State University, San Bernardino, and I teach in the Department of Educational Leadership and Technology. So thank you for having me here. All right, so we're going to start off with an overview of the agenda, and we're going to look at the invisibility and intersectionality regarding this issue of disproportionate discipline regarding Black girls. And that's that, then we're going to go into the wide region and look at what kinds of resolutions that we can have and, you know, hammering down and looking at this issue, this problem of high levels of suspensions and expulsions. Why are suspension rates so disproportionately high for Black girls? So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to look at recommendations. Those recommendations are going to be culturally proficient leadership, the 7 C's of engagement, Quantum 10 equity framework, positive behavioral intervention and support, and restorative practices. So those are the things that we're going to look at and talk to you about regarding Black girls and the high suspension rates that goes along in schools. First of all, for decades, data and studies on racial inequality have focused primarily either on Blacks or on girls in general. And this inequity treatment of Black girls is too often obscured and overshadowed by this kind of research. So it seems as if the Black girls are invisible, or that they're invisible and they're not seen. But Kimberly Crenshaw's work on intersectionality brings that information forth that shows that no matter what, Black girls are both Black and girls. So simply put, disproportionate discipline is not simply a compound of gender and race, but rather the intersection of gender and race. So we have to look at it through that lens. When we also look at the school to prison pipeline, that kind of discussion usually kind of puts forth young males of color. But lately, Black girls have the fastest growing number of suspension rates. They experience discipline rates 6 times higher than white girls, and they experience suspension rates higher than 67% of boys as well. This is staggering information. And although Black girls are 17% of the overall student population, when incidents are reported to law enforcement by school officials, it goes up almost double to 31%. So Black girls, when you look at this information on campuses, it just becomes staggering. Over the past 10 to 15 years, when we look at recent trends, the recent trends go back to 2007, where Black girls are treated inequitably with regarding to the infractions that occur. So if you take some time and look through some of these incidences, you'll see that in 2007, a 6-year-old girl was arrested in Florida for having a tantrum. And then a 16-year-old girl in California was arrested for dropping cake on the floor, and she didn't seem to clean it up to the satisfaction of the school officer's satisfaction. So those kinds of things are occurring in schools, but then the girls get treated so inequitably when it comes to the suspension or the discipline surrounding that. Again, these things, these recent trends that are occurring, they haven't changed, and so we've got to address this issue. So those are the problems in schools.
Well, thank you, Dr. Luke, for that information. And as you all heard Dr. Luke mention, the school to prison pipeline and all of the recent trends in the discipline for Black girls, we look at and we talk about how we can better serve our Black girls. And so basically, I want to talk to you a little bit about zero tolerance. And so zero tolerance was implemented in the 1990s, and it was a policy put in place to deter students from bringing weapons into the schools. And so this was a theory, and with this theory in mind, schools and districts and states began to crack down on weapons, and then it also included some minor infraction, which is what you see happening to our girls. And so basically, these zero tolerance policies were just introduced to deter, again, students from bringing weapons, and it was supposed to be to suspend or expel students for bringing guns to school, but it started off, but it ended up being an exclusionary practice to provide consequences for minor infractions, such as the ones that you saw in the previous slide, tantrums, cake on the floor, things like that. And so I'm not going to spend too much time in zero tolerance, just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. But what I will tell you about is a video that Dr. Clark Luke and I had an opportunity to watch. And it's Patterns of Violence, and it's a video that was produced or put on by CBS this morning, and it was a series on school, a series called Schools Matter. And in this video, we see a Black girl, young Black girl. She's talking to us about an experience she had when she was about 8 years old, and she was in second grade at the time. She recalls having an altercation, a verbal altercation with a white girl, and her teacher dragged her outside and sat her outside for a period of time, and where she wandered away as an 8-year-old second grader. She wandered away and was gone for hours, and no one knew where she was for hours. And then she speaks now, she's a little older now, and she speaks about this incident, and she even talks about contemplating suicide. So we invite you to watch this video. If you'd like to watch the video, you can scan the QR code, or you can enter the bit.ly. The bit.ly is One Black Girls Video. Again, put bit.ly/1 and Black Girls Video. Put that into your URL browser at your convenience, and you can also observe the video.
Okay, so now that we've adequately identified the problem, we're going to look at some of the recommendations that we have that are research-based, and look at some of the frameworks that we have. So we'll start off with looking at the decision makers who actually make the decision when the infraction or whatever occurs, and they make the decision to either suspend or discipline or do whatever regarding the situation. Culturally proficient leaders. So we want to promote having culturally proficient leaders in the schools. And culturally proficient leaders are a way of being, and the way of being that enables both the individual and organizations to respond effectively to people who are different from them. We have to look at the policies and the practices that are going on in these schools. Cultural proficiency is grounded in acknowledging, first of all, that we have systemic barriers. Once we acknowledge that, then we can allow educators and schools and parents and families to embrace change and equitable discipline practices. So we've got to be able to acknowledge that and be honest that there's something wrong with this for students, Black girls, to be suspended and expelled for things such as dropping cake on the floor and then not cleaning it up to someone's satisfaction. Culturally proficient leaders look for ways to examine data for inequities and develop actions to better serve all students. So we've got to look at those things. So that's looking at the leadership of a school and a district. Once we start expanding that, we look at the 7 C's of engagement, and that's what that is about, engaging and partnering with families and communities. And the 7 C's quickly are the communication, looking at giving and receiving information, making sure that the information is given broadly and in languages that parents understand and families understand. Collaboration, working together, that's what that is. Compassion and care, showing the young ladies that we care about them and that they feel they can be protected at school. The culture, looking at the values and the practices that are at the school and at the homes, in the homes. Community, that's a group that cares about each other, looking at and examining the values of that community. Also, another C is the connectedness, having our Black girls to feel like they belong, because they do belong. They do belong in our educational system. They do belong in the classroom, and they have a right to learn. And they can't learn if they're being expelled or suspended for minor infractions. And then there's the collective responsibility, and the responsibility is ours. It's building organizational capacity and community capacity to make sure that everybody has the right to a safe learning environment in our schools. And we want to try to have that for our young Black girls.
Thank you, Dr. Luke. I appreciate hearing you say that. And before we move into PBIS, I want to introduce a framework that I developed, and it actually goes kind of along with, now that I'm hearing it, it goes along with the cultural proficiency and the equity partners. And so Quantum 10 is a framework that I developed, and PBIS is one of the elements underneath there. Another one is adaptive leadership and parent and community engagement. So they kind of go hand in hand with this. And so with PBIS, we're asking that we eliminate the number of instances for girls that are our Black girls specifically, that are being excluded from education and from their school. And so with that, it is PBIS is a tier system of support, and there are 3 different tiers, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But as I tell you about utilizing PBIS in lieu of zero tolerance exclusionary practices, we talk about ensuring that we put this framework into place because it addresses behavioral challenges in schools, and it establishes positive preventative evidence. It establishes positive preventative and evidence-based practices that result in a desired outcome for all of our kids. And it has a system that features and that promotes sustainability when it's implemented with fidelity. And so the 3 tiers are the universal prevention for all students is tier 1. And then tier 2 is a targeted prevention for some students that are still experiencing challenges after being a part of the whole group. And then the 3rd tier is an intensive individualized prevention when students who have already been exposed to the level 1 tier prevention and the level 2, and they still experience a few challenges, we provide them with some intense individualized support. And so that's going to be PBIS. And another one of the elements that is underneath the Quantum 10 equity framework is going to be restorative practices. And that's another framework that we could use in lieu of zero tolerance policies. So restorative practices is an emerging social science that studies show how it strengthens relationships between individuals and social connections within communities. And it kind of is rooted in restorative justice, and it is a way of just looking at criminal behavior or even infractions, and it emphasizes repairing the harm that has been done to people and relationships rather than penalizing the person who is doing the harm or the offender. And so basically it focuses primarily on building those relationships with the community and just in any conflict that arises. If you see on the screen, you also see the social justice window that talks about doing things with students versus doing it for them or to them. And that is another way of building those relationships and restoring like any type of relationship that might have been broken rather than talking about it being punitive. And so basically the use of restorative practices helps reduce crime, violence, and bullying. It improves student behavior. It is strengthening the civil society, and it provides effective leadership and restores relationships in detail. And so we have a few reflective questions for you that we want to leave you with as we end for today. And so the first reflective question is, what do you believe is at the heart of the disparities that we see in young Black girls and discipline in our schools? So reflect on that. And then our second reflective question is going to be, how can you be a part of creating equitable solutions for our Black girls? So those are our 2 reflective questions. We'd love if you take a survey for us, and as you look at the bit.ly and the QR code, I'm going to allow for Dr. Luke to end us up with a summary today. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you. Dr. Luke?
All right. So in summary, there are some strategies that we can use, some recommendations that we can follow and implement that will help decrease the number of suspensions that are going on against Black girls. We want to make sure that we are supporting them. We want to make sure that we protect them and that they know that we care about them. And to look at not only the numbers, but when we look at the young ladies, the girls, we want to make sure that we're supporting their social, emotional well-being. And we want to be able to make sure that they have positive educational experiences that they deserve, and to make sure that the policies and the implementation of those policies are equitable and equitably done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Luke. And again, take the survey. You should have already clicked the code. References and resources if you would like.
Mm-hmm. And here's
and our
our,
contact information. Thank you, Dr. Luke.
thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day. Thank you. Good job, Talisa.
Yeah, fist bump. Great job. Thank you, Dr. Luke. It was a pleasure.
All right, thank you.